Guess who's back? And ready to talk about 36 more romances from a Goodreads list. It's your girl, resident dumb bitch, me. I decided to read the books from this list because, as per usual, I feel like I'm really out of the loop on what romances are getting released in a given year, especially traditionally published romances. I'm more of an indie girl typically myself, but I do like to read, what's popular, what's fresh, what's new, so I can have things to recommend for you. Goodreads, they always answer my calls. At this point, I really do feel like Daddy Bezos is on my side and he gets his lackeys over at Goodreads to write these lists for me. All jokes. Thank you, Sizzle, for putting this list together for all of us. This list in particular, I think, is called the 36 most anticipated romances as shelved by Goodreads readers. So all of the books on this list were books that a lot of people put on their want to read shelf on Goodreads. So you would assume that the romances on this list are going to be like the most popular choices, things that everybody are super hyped to read. I think the releases on this list span from January to August. So it's not a completely exhaustive list, but it definitely has a ton of romances for us to read, or for me, I guess, to read and tell you about. And that's what I did. I read all 36 of these books and I'm going to tell you whether they suck or whether they fuck. My methods are far from scientific, but I'm going to, again, go through the list of 36 books, tell you what I think was good and what wasn't good, and maybe this will help inform some of your choices in the future, or maybe you just want to hear me bitch about books for however long this video will be. Regardless, let's get into the 36 most anticipated romances of 2022, according to Goodreads users, which you probably are. Alright, first up we have Weather Girl by Rachel Lynn Solomon. Cloudy with a Chance of Mediocrity. Let's talk about a book with an adult Parent Trap plotline. This book follows up-and-coming meteorologist Ari Abrams, who's trying to make a name for herself at a station that is a Category 5 mess. Ari currently lives in the shadows of resident weather girl Torrance Hale, who is constantly at odds in the workplace with her ex-husband, the news director, which rightfully makes everybody employed at the station very uncomfortable. And while sharing their discomfort at the secondhand embarrassment, Ari strikes up a conversation with sports reporter Russell the Love Muscle. I made that second part up if that wasn't clear. Anyway, Russ and Ari team up to sort of parent trap Torrance and her sexy exy in a misguided attempt to eventually, maybe one day, get professional development. Ari and Russ are looking to further their careers and, maybe be on TV more often than they currently are, but they can't really do it when their mentors are being boneheaded and making pranks in the office. If the spotline sounds a little bit childish, that's because it kind of is. Well, silly ass premise aside, I actually didn't hate this book. Rachel Lynn Solomon has a really unique voice in romance writing, and I think she particularly excels in writing heroines that have a lot of issues that I think a lot of other people can relate to. In this book specifically, Ari really deals with a depression that I don't think I've seen represented in romance before. It's a kind of depression where you put on a really brave face for the people around you, you're able to be relatively functional, but on the inside you're kind of dying. It wasn't a representation of like my own personal brand of depression, but it's something that I think could appeal to a lot of people and that a lot of people could relate to. In adding in that depth of struggle and personality, I really think this author's books feel more real as a result. Like sure, a person falling in love that has no mental illness or no problems really surrounding them is great, but it's even cooler to see people with mental health be able to like work through those struggles and find love on the other side of it. I also liked that we had a plus size hero because I don't know about you, but I for one am a little bit sick of the washboard abs Adonis thing. This was a really solid read, nothing that made me swoon to the moon, but also not something that made me want to throw my phone at the wall, which I'll consider a win. On a scale of sucks to fucks, I'm gonna give this 3 perfectly average lovemaking stars. Number 35, Bad Luck Bridesmaid by Allison Rose Greenberg. Reading a bad book sucks enough, but reading a bad romance on the way back from your dream honeymoon, my review will definitely reflect those thoughts and feelings. Bad Luck Bridesmaid by Allison Rose Greenberg is one of my only 1-star reads that I had this year. It follows our main character Zoe, who is a cursed bridesmaid. Why is she cursed, you may ask? Because she has been asked to be the bridesmaid in 3 separate weddings, none of which have actually happened. After each of these 3 failed weddings, Zoe kind of goes on this journey of self-exploration, reflect on her rah-rah, I'm a cool girl, I don't want a long-term relationship thing, and she's forced to kind of confront these feelings when she must see her ex at her best friend's upcoming wedding. This will be like the 4th wedding that she's been asked to be a bridesmaid at. This ex, yes, indeed, our heroine did string him along for many a year. I think he's like considerably older than our heroine, and we get to see their relationship sort of unfold before us. He treats her super well, he is a kind individual, he wants marriage and babies, and our heroine's like, yeah, I'm not really sure about that, but like, I'll come to a conclusion eventually. And then when push comes to shove and our hero proposes, our heroine's like, yeah, now I'm out. But of course, she has to see him again at her best friend's wedding, where things get a little bit interesting, because even though she still does not want to commit to this man, she strings him along at the wedding, even though he has a date. Now listen, I am a marriage and babies individual, but I don't think that everyone has to be, and I want to see more of that representation in romance. I don't, however, want to see a heroine treat someone like shit who does want those things. Willingly and knowingly and continually hurting someone who only cares about you doesn't make for a very sympathetic heroine. And on top of that, the pacing of the story was just so bizarre. The entire first half of the book read more like someone's memoir or someone telling you about their life story. Zoe is detailing these failed relationships that she's kind of been a part of. I mean, like, she's been the bridesmaid, and then the engaged couple kind of like falls apart, and then she also details the entire length of a romantic relationship that she ends before the book really begins. No. Hell no. Sucks. Sucks. One, that wasn't worth the BV stars. Number 34, Reminders of Him by Colleen Hoover. Reminders of Him, more like remind me what the hell this book was about. Colleen Hoover's most recently published and totally forgettable in my eyes release is about Kenna, who is recently released from prison and is intent on meeting her daughter, who she has not met since giving birth to her nearly 4 years ago. In the process, she ends up coming into contact with a guy named Ledger. She meets him at a bar before she ends up trying to attempt to see her daughter, who she's like not supposed to be seeing. She has given up all custody to her daughter at this point. She meets Ledger at this bar. They kind of have this instant spark, this instant chemistry, until Kenna finds out who Ledger is and vice versa. Ledger is someone who is really close to Kenna's daughter and has mixed feelings about her eventually meeting her daughter. In typical Coho fashion, this book attempts to have the heroine go on this harrowing journey while the reader looks on and gains some sort of like profound thoughts, which to her credit does sometimes work, but this time, not so much. I really feel like this book was a missed opportunity. Having a heroine who has gone to prison and who is now trying to rebuild her life is completely fascinating, and I feel like is not something that we really ever see in romance. But instead of focusing in on the realities of that and making the injustice of the foster care system something to focus her attention on, we have Kenna instead trying to fight her kids' grandparents just to see her. And while I get how shitty that is, and I get that that was supposed to tug on your heartstrings, really the only thread of conflict in this book was Kenna trying to constantly convince these grandparents, like, hey, I should have a chance to see her, until they eventually break down and let her see her kid. And it rang kind of hollow for me because all of these attempts felt the same. Kenna is broken down time and time again, and yet nothing is really gained each time. It's just like repeated attempt after repeated attempt. It just feels tired after a while, not to mention the relationship, or lack thereof, with Ledger. God, I just feel like the hero here sucked. Protective of the kid, I guess, but the relationship between Kenna and Ledger here was mostly just based on attraction, and I really did not buy it. Other than that, they really had no reason to want to be together. This book is one that is not going to have a lasting impact on me, which again is such a shame because again, such a missed opportunity here. I think if you're a Coho fan, you've probably already read this book, but if you're someone who is looking to get into Colleen Hoover's books and you only want to read some of her best stuff, I would say skip this one. I'd give this 2, dude, that's my inner thigh, stars. Number 33, Electric Idol by Katie Robert. All aboard the all smut no substance train, we're taking a pony ride to Olympus. This book follows the exploits of Eros and Psyche. Psyche is basically a plus-sized Kardashian who Aphrodite puts a hit out on, and the hitman Eros can't seem to carry out this hit because he has a thing for Miss Psyche's sugar lumps. Eros is giving a big time Edward Cullen energy because he's kind of a sociopath, but he's also kind of remorseful about all the time he's spending killing for his mommy. And Psyche is fine. She's about as interesting as the chick from the last book, but she didn't piss me off, which I guess is about all I can ask for from Katie Robert. I think this book worked a little bit better for me than the first book in the series, Neon Gods, because while there is a big sexual component to the story, there were at least, I guess, some weak attempts at emotion. And maybe you don't want the emotion. Maybe you just want a Greek mythology retelling in Bone Town, in which case, this could totally rock for you. There's just an originality that is kind of lacking overall, and I don't really think it knocks it out of the park in any regard. On the fucks to suck scale, this is a 2. He's a killer, but for some reason his sexual appetite is really softcore. Stars. Number 32, How to Love Your Neighbor by Sophie Sullivan. Every so often a book comes along and I genuinely wonder how the hell it was greenlit by a publisher. This book is about a girl who inherits a small home from her grandmother, I believe. She is a recent college grad. She went to school for interior design, and while she knows that she's probably not going to make millions doing this, she's just really passionate about what she does, and she's excited to not only have a place to call her own, but a place to really flex her newfound skill. The ultimate millennial dream, honestly. But dreams are meant to be crushed under the boot of a rich white man. Grace's neighbor Noah wants to bulldoze her house and make it a part of his mega mansion compound he's trying to build next door. What could be more charming than that? Didn't finish this book, and I doubt the heroine would have finished either had I continued reading. 31, Made in Manhattan by Lauren Lane. Another book to add to the list of why was this published in 2022, not because it was tone deaf or ignorant of the realities of post-pandemic life for millennials, but because it felt like a relic from the bygone era of gems such as Something Borrowed. From the cover to the premise, this book just felt painfully dated to me. This book is a gender-swapped My Fair Lady, which on the surface sounds pretty exciting, but in execution was just really boring. We have our hero Kane, who is the long-lost grandson of a really wealthy woman who owns this company, right? And she is looking to pass down her legacy. But oh no, he wears denim and is from the bayou of Louisiana, and so someone needs to come correct. Someone needs to change Kane and make him into a city slicker, and who better to do that than our, like, old grandmotherly figure's, like, favorite person that works for her. For some reason can't inherit the company because, like, that would just be too crazy. Violet. So Kane and Violet reluctantly team up to help this old lady's dreams come true. Falling in love and then falling falling into a tango with one another. Look, this wasn't a bad book. I think if you're looking for a Grumpy Sunshine story and you're desperate to read more books set in Manhattan because for some reason you've never been and you really want to idealize what New York is like, sure, maybe this could scratch an itch. But as a romance, this book was just so forgettable that I can't even conjure a vague memory of real moments in this story beyond a banal makeover scene involving slacks and sweaters. On the sucks to fuck scale, this is 2 Can You Turn the Lights Off and Light a Single Scented Candle stars. Number 30, A Letter to Three Witches by Elizabeth Bass. I'll just say it, I don't think romances about witches should exist because every single one of them is cursed. I am very open to this being a wrong assessment. However, as of when this video is getting posted, I've yet to find a single witch romance that doesn't completely suck. And sadly, A Letter to Three Witches is no exception. This book is about 3 cousins who come from a line of witches, and yet they are not supposed to have power themselves because of this like family curse. One day, their adopted sister slash cousin comes to them and says, "Hey, I stole one of y'all's man, and we're leaving at the end of this week. We're getting out of here. Him and I, we're leaving town." Everyone is kind of scratching their heads, wondering, is it my boyfriend she's talking about? Because she doesn't detail who exactly is getting snatched, who's getting stolen, and each of the other 3 cousins has partners, and they're going to be taken up with our good bitch Tanith. So, farewell, sayonara. This is also further complicated by the fact that not only is one of their partners going to be gone by the end of the week, they are also starting to see moments of magic come into their lives. They're not supposed to be using magic. They're like kind of banned from using magic, but they're starting to use magic in ways that they're like not even 100% fully aware of, so it's like there's just chaos all around. We have to figure out what's happening. It's just foolishness is what it is. The main downfall of this book, I think, is that it just didn't know what it wanted to be. It wasn't charming enough to be this like cozy small town romance. It wasn't funny enough to be a rom-com, and it wasn't plot driven enough to be an urban fantasy romance that I typically would expect in this genre. Like if you're gonna be a witchy romance, I'm gonna assume it's gonna be kind of like an urban fantasy romance. This just was not that. All of this coupled with the fact that the 3 main characters in this book each cheat on their respective partners for seemingly no reason, it's just a hard no for me. This book gets 1, wow, that was over before it even started, stars. Number 29, Getting His Game Back by Gia de Cadenet. Is a book where I think the cover, title, and marketing do a total disservice to the tone and energy of the story. This book is about a guy named Khalil who's recently gone through a bit of a rough patch mentally, and he's trying to get back on his feet and get his proverbial game back because he knows that he wants a romantic relationship, something long-term, something stable, something real. In walks Vanessa, badass tech lady, to get a shape up at Khalil's barbershop. The chemistry between both characters is pretty instant, but both have major reservations given their pasts. Khalil's last relationship left him with some major scars, and Vanessa has been burned by one too many white dudes who don't really understand what it's like to be or be with a black woman, which I think makes for a compelling and frankly pretty original contemporary romance. My only issue here was that I feel like the execution was just a touch lacking. I think the emotions in the story definitely felt real, and I think the intimate moments in this book felt really hot and very authentic, but the abysmal pacing and the lack of any real plot kept this from being a true standout romance. Now, don't get me wrong, I really enjoy a character-focused story. I just didn't feel like there was enough time spent with hero and heroine together. There's so much time with each individual character spent inside their own heads, stewing and thinking about the conversations they've had with each other. You get from each character's point of view how they felt that conversation went, and it just goes on forever and ever and ever, and it doesn't feel like we're moving forward in the story or that anything's really happening at all in the story. And that was really especially rough because I felt like the last quarter of the story was also super emotionally taxing. So not only does the story not really feel like it's moving anywhere, but the end of the story just feels like a bit of a slog to get through because you're being so trampled down by the emotions of Khalil, our hero. He definitely deals with a very difficult time emotionally at the end of the story, so I think if this is a book you're maybe thinking of picking up or considering picking up, you might want to think about that before doing so. I feel like I have a hard time rating this book lowly because I do think we need more romances with good mental health representation, especially when it comes to men, and more specifically men getting help and going to therapy. But did I enjoy reading this book? Not so much. I'm gonna have to give this, I'm almost there. Oh, you're done. Okay. Stars. Number 28, The Roughest Draft by Emily Wibberley and Austin Siegmund Broca. Roughest Draft seeks to answer the question, what would it be like if I wrote fan fiction of my own life with my writer husband? And it does answer that question in a seriously pretentious, messy as hell, but extremely hot fashion. Everyone say thank you to Emily and Austin, the raunchy little freaks that they are. This book is about Katrina and Nathan, who wrote the next great American novel together before having a bit of a falling out. Flash forward a couple years, and the contractual obligation that these two have to write a new novel, coupled with failing romantic relationships in each of their lives, brings these two back into each other's Florida humidity-soaked arms. It is in Florida where they write a smutty little tale about a divorcing couple while trying to avoid shucking each other's corn between sentences. And I'm not gonna lie, this book worked for me spectacularly. This is one of those books that you don't want to look too hard at because it wasn't truly spectacular. But when you read a book with a similar premise before picking up this one, that was a total fucking dud, looking at you book lovers, which we'll talk about a little bit later, I couldn't help but be a little bit impressed. Honestly, I enjoyed the hell out of the story, which really does take me by surprise because I'm not typically drawn to stories with this level of pretentiousness in prose. But if you hand me some well-crafted angst, I fold like a cheap lawn chair, so I'm gonna give this one 5 got me walking side to side stars. Number 27, Near, Far, Wherever You Are by Maya Banks didn't actually get published this year, much to the dismay of many a disgruntled Goodreads reviewer. I will say, going down the rabbit hole for this book, and its many supposed past publication dates, was more entertaining than a good portion of the books on this list. And seeing as it is the 12th book in a series, I can't say that I'm gutted to see this one not get published, because I feel like I'd be totally lost if I picked it up. Let's move on. 26, Something Fabulous by Alexis Hall. Petition, though, to change the name of this story to Something Fucking Stupid. I'm really sorry, but this list has not been kind to my opinion on Alexis Hall's writing. It's a damn shame because I feel like he's written some really good stuff, some of which has been published this year, like A Lady for a Duke. Fantastic book, would recommend. I think, sadly, I'm learning that I just really don't appreciate his attempts at humor in stories. This book is about Valentine, Bonnie, and Bella, who is not a crusty white dog, but certainly has the personality of one. Valentine, at the start of the story, pops the question to Bella because it was his dying daddy's final wish. It wasn't, of course, an entirely romantic proposition, but it certainly did not warrant the response that was the rest of this book. Essentially, Bella ends up running away from Valentine after he proposes, and Valentine goes with Bonnie, who is Bella's brother, to go and find her. When they catch up to her, she claims not to know who Valentine is and gets him into situations that are just completely unwarranted. He ends up like kidnapped and tied up by people that Bella is staying with, and he stays like that for a good majority of the story, which I think as readers we're supposed to find like funny, but it's not funny haha, it's funny weird. It did not land at all, unlike the bullet that Valentine takes for absolutely no reason. I guess I could begrudgingly admit that this book could work for you if you like a historical romance with a lot of like humor, I guess. If you're looking for a book that feels like a romp, maybe pick this one up. You're a braver little toaster than I. This is 2 itchy, hay-knee BJs in a barn stars. Number 25, Good Girl Complex by Elle Kennedy. Have you ever read Wattpad sensation Anna Todd's works and wished that they had more of an Outer Banks feel? Have I got the book for you? Good Girl Complex by Elle Kennedy follows Mackenzie Big Mac Cabot, a rich good girl looking to escape her trust fund lifestyle by attending a college in Avalon Bay. It's a place with a pretty big divide between wealthy students and poorer locals, and old Special Sauce and Pickles wants to see how the other half lives, especially since her escape to Avalon Bay is not fueled by a desire to get an education, since her internet business is already taking off. Initially, our girl, Two All Beef Patties, links up with her long-term boyfriend Chad at university. I think he's been going there for a couple of years. This is her first year, but she is not feeling the flame of the griddle of her heart like she used to. Meanwhile, Chad is giving the real love interest Cooper a beatdown at Cooper's place of business, thereby getting him fired from his job, and Cooper is now desperate to seek revenge. And how is he going to do this? That's where the Anna Todd comes in, my friends. Cooper is going to place a bet with his friends that he is going to get back at Chad by sleeping with his girlfriend. And look, I love drama in romance as much as the next bored bitch, but to place bets on bagging a girl who you're already falling for, irredeemable idiocy. I'm sorry, sweaty. Just not an enjoyable read, even setting aside the whole like waiting for the other shoe to drop thing. 2, he wears a backwards hat during sex, stars. 24, Lockdown on London Lane by Beth Regals. If your man ordered pineapple on pizza, do you think that this would spur you to start a relationship-ending argument about marriage and babies? This book seeks to answer that question and many more, all set during 1 week of Rona lockdown in one apartment complex in London. The premise of the story was interesting enough, I can give it that. You've got relationships all at different stages in the different apartments, and you get to see how strained forced proximity either works for or against said relationships. I think my issue, though, with the story is that this book doesn't have enough time to progress any of the relationships in a way that's interesting. I mean, I get it, you have limited page length, limited storytelling time in the sense that the book, again, is taking place over the course of a week, and you have too many characters, but at that point, I feel like maybe consider retooling the story. I don't know, this book was peddled as a romance, and it was written by the same chick that wrote the Kissing Booth book, but I feel like this book probably would have worked better in a different genre that requires less emphasis on those interpersonal romantic relationships. Like, there was no people really falling for each other except for like one couple. 2, let's pretend that never happened stars. Number 23, Count Your Lucky Stars by Alexandria Belfleur. Count your lucky stars that we don't have another total bummer on our hands, but also don't get too excited because this was not exactly a thrill ride either. This book is a second chance friends to lovers story about Olivia and Margot. Olivia is a wedding coordinator for some of Margot's Margot's friends who are getting married, and Olivia and Margot have to confront their feelings for each other because, oh my god, it's a second chance romance. Essentially, they spent 2 sex-filled, sweaty weeks in high school together just for Olivia to get back with her mega chad boyfriend and marry him right out of high school. Gross. But don't worry, Olivia is freshly divorced and looking for some lady love and ends up falling for Margot, who basically I think co-founded an app that's like CoStar. I really wanted to love this book as much as I love women, but sadly it was kind of lackluster. I feel like the main issue here was really the lack of show and way too much tell. I get that it can be really challenging to show 2 characters' pasts as an author. Like, you know those characters' pasts, you have that like feeling in your head, you know what they felt for each other in the past, but I feel like to properly portray that on the page can be really, really tricky, and I just feel like it didn't really land here. There were a couple of moments where the characters were like in the car together, and one would be like, hey, do you want to stop for this drink? And they're like, oh my god, I can't believe you remember that. That's kind of the extent of the past that we really know of the 2 characters, and you know, obviously that they like slept together for a couple of weeks in the past. And the third act conflict, sadly, in this book was one of the corniest that I've read all year. To this book's credit, the steamier moments definitely set this book apart from some other female-female romances that I've read. I feel like too often when an author sets out to like write a sapphic romance, they're like, ooh, let's make this sweet. But like, we don't want that. Well, I mean, I'm not gonna speak for you, but I don't want that all of the time, you know? I want some like raunchiness too. But yeah, that's about all the good I can say for this book. 3, I guess that was better than if I took care of it myself. Stars. 22, Not the Witch You Wed by April Asher. You know those books that you just never want to end? This book was exactly the opposite of that. I was praying, hoping, wishing that this modest 341-page book would end. Which feels a little unfair to say because I feel like this book wasn't absolutely horrible. The writing was mostly okay and the premise was fine, I guess. But I felt almost zero chemistry between this witch and her alpha werewolf fake fiance. I really have come to the conclusion that witch books are cursed. 2, I'd rather read that Jacob and Renesmee book that Stephanie Meyer's been talking about. Stars. 21, One Night on the Island by Josie Silver. I want to start off by saying that I am sure that Josie Silver is a fucking delight, a treat of a woman even, but I can't think of an author who more consistently writes romances that I cannot stand. One Night on the Island is a book that sadly I did not spend more than an hour of time trying to get through. From what I did read, it's about Cleo, a 30-year-old hag looking for her rest of time shag. She's feeling really down in the dumps about the fact that she's just so unspeakably old that she decides to go and work through some of her feelings on a remote island, but oh no, it's been double booked by a really steamy hunky man. Someone strike up the violin music and draw this woman a bubble bath. If you didn't catch my pretty blatant implication, not even implication, statement a second ago, I did not finish this book. The interactions between our hero and heroine were sadly just so painfully boring and clinical, and I just didn't give a flying fuck about the charming island inhabitants. They're simply to make things more complicated for our hero and heroine. Self-care is DNFing stuff that you know you're going to end up hating, so I shall refrain from rating. 20, Delilah Green Doesn't Care by Ashley Herring Blake. A book that I sadly ended up not caring very much about, which is so disappointing as it is the only other female-female romance on this list, and yet it sadly falls prey to being just as boring as Count Your Lucky Stars in my eyes. This book follows Delilah Green, who is asked by her stepsister to return to her much hated hometown to take pictures of aforementioned stepsister's wedding. Her and stepsissy Pooh do not get along, mostly due to the absolute monster of a woman that Delilah has for a stepmother. But after some time spent sulking and sabotaging, Delilah and her stepsister's friends realize what a douche the soon-to-be groom is, and they try to team up to get rid of him for good. All while Delilah ends up falling for one of her stepsister's best friends, Claire. And this book had elements that I like, don't get me wrong, but tonally, this was just kind of a weird one for me. From the synopsis of the story, I was expecting a silly rom-com with some heart. Instead, I got a strangely melancholy story about a 30-year-old woman with some seriously unresolved trauma, juxtaposed with some seriously childish antics. I will say that this book is just as steamy as Count Your Lucky Stars, and I did like the side cast of characters. Hell, I might even be interested in reading some of the next books in the series, but I kind of needed Delilah to grow the fuck up in order to enjoy this story, and it only barely happened. 3, Netflix and chill, but the kind where you get distracted by the show like mid-sex. Stars. Hook, Line, and Sinker by Tessa Bailey. More like Hook, Line, and Stinker, am I right? I just wanted to say that honestly, this book didn't actually suck, but it happened one summer, it is not. And despite going in with an open mind and really wanting to love the story as much as I loved It Happened One Summer, this one, it just ended up falling flat for me, which was disappointing because I was really into Fox and Hannah when we met them in the aforementioned first book. So this book is a friends to lovers story that is primarily complicated by Fox's reputation as a ladies' man. It's just so hard being a hot man, you know? Everyone thinks you're a man whore because you've got to live up to that reputation, even when all you really want is the love of a good woman. Aww. I don't have anything particularly funny or hateful to say about this book. It wasn't bad. It was just strangely forgettable for a woman who likes to include novelty sex acts in pretty much all of her published romances. 3. Light Spanking is the most adventurous we're ever gonna get. Stars. 18. A Brush with Love by Macy Eddings. What's sexier than a dentist rooting around in your mouth? 2 dentists rooting around in each other's mouths. A Brush with Love has perhaps the weirdest premise to a romance I've read all year, if we don't count the sentient gargoyle smut I read back in August, which is irrelevant for this here video. Anyway, this book is about teeth lover extraordinaire Harper, who is trying to get into an oral surgery residency when she comes into contact with first-year tooth doctor Dan. He's dealing with some trauma stemming from his childhood emotional abuse that we get to see really delightful flashbacks of, and Harper is dealing with a very debilitating anxiety disorder. Somehow they make it work and do the devil's dance together. This book was just really corny for me. The interactions here were the kind of corn made of candy that rots your teeth. I really appreciate the mental health rep here, but that's about all I can say for the story. It was just pretty damn forgettable. 2, he was so boring I forgot to even include him in my notes at body count list. Stars. 17. The Sweet Spot by Trish Dollar. If interior decorating gets you hot and bothered, I've got the book for you. The Sweet Spot is a story about single mother Rachel, who is the manager of a luxury hotel. But unfortunately, at the start of the story, she gets unfairly fired from her job manager, but she is the kind of person to make lemons into lemonade and decides that she is going to seek a job elsewhere, something a little bit different, something in a different locale, and she ends up going from Florida to Ohio to help a man she's never met open a hotel. What she doesn't know before accepting the job is that the hotel isn't even close to finish, and she is going to have to help this man get this hotel into fighting shape so that they can, like, you know, be successful together. This is one of those books that is so unremarkable and yet so inoffensive that it's hard to summon up meaningful commentary for it. The best that I can really say for this book is that this one accomplishes what Josie Silver and scores of other chick lit adjacent romance authors wish they could, which is a book that feels breezy to read and doesn't totally piss me off. It's romantic enough to keep me invested, but it's nothing so spectacular as to elicit emotion. 3. Long-term relationship where he can hit the spots, but the positions are the same every time. Stars. 16. The League of Gentlewomen Witches by India Holton. Genre bending is rarely a good idea. I'm not saying find other ways to be inventive with your storytelling, but no, yes, I definitely am saying that. Because when you write a historical romance and you try to include pirates and witches and flying houses and secret societies, shit gets really confusing really fast. This book is about a witch heroine and a pirate hero, both after the same artifact, and since they have different moral codes, it's sort of a semi-rivals to lovers story. I just didn't give a flying house about this book. I'm sorry, I just really can't get over the fucking flying houses. Pirate houses in this story fly, and yet we're never really told why. Anyway, the sex scenes also in this book were just not it. Now, that's a really big reason why I didn't enjoy the story. The plot, nonsense. The sex, also nonsense. I get that sometimes when you are engaging in the act, you can kind of get in your head too much and kind of like be taken out of the moment, but that's not something I want to read when I am reading a sex scene in a book. Like, I can get in my head during sex while having sex. I don't want to get in someone else's head while they're having sex. It's just not fun. It's not fun. It's not sexy. 2, the only person who could in a moving house is Howl, as narrated by Christian Bale, not this pirate schmuck. Stars. 15. Falls Boys by Penelope Douglas. If you've ever wanted to have sex in a haunted house, I have a book with the vibes for you. Falls Boys follows Arrow and Hawk, and it is the first book in a spin-off series by Penelope Douglas. Arrow is a girl from the wrong side of the tracks, Hawk is this golden boy, and they get sucked into each other's orbit after Arrow attempts to steal something from Hawk's house, and they end up having to kind of like run from the police together after this encounter. This book is one of the only, if not the only, indie romances on this list, and it is packed with action and steam that I've come to expect from this author. Yes, maybe I'm biased because I love indie romance, but I just feel like it pushes the envelope farther than traditionally published romance ever could. We get interesting plot lines, we get inventive sex scenes. It's fun. Sorry for a lack of puns for this book. I just actually enjoyed this one. So 4, backseat of his car, stars. 14, To Marry and to Meddle by Martha Waters. I'm sorry, I am so over the historical romance marriage of convenience. There's just something so off-putting about an entirely unromantic proposition and the men who try and hold their feelings down for the entirety of the book. It just makes me drier than a Thanksgiving turkey. I will say this was a fine enough audiobook listening experience in that I was able to tune in and out and miss pretty much nothing that was happening in this story, but I think that also probably says something about the quality of the storytelling. This book is about a dude, a second son, who is disowned by his father after running his own business because apparently back in the day, you were seen as uncool if you were industrious, and this guy wants to own a theater. And the dude in his theater owning is thinking, how can I bring legitimacy to this enterprise? Because theater was something that was kind of seen as like a little sketchy, not somewhere you would like bring your wife. So he thinks, if I marry a woman with a good reputation, I can maybe get some like other people with good reputation to come to my theater, thereby making me more money. In comes Emily, personality of a hint water, and willing to marry whoever as long as it means she doesn't have to marry the guy who her parents are indebted to. So Emily and Theater Kid elope and live happily ever after. He implies that her only useful skills are party planning and picking out draperies, because if you have a uterus, that means you have a goldfish brain, and she's just happy because she's getting her corn shucked on a regular basis. But eventually, of course, you know, in traditional historical romance, marriage, and convenience fashion, he learns he is a bit of a misogynist, and he does actually love her. Thrilling stuff. 2 topping stars. 13, Reputation by Lex Croucher. This book is if Emma Woodhouse was Katie Heron in Mean Girls. You've got bitchiness within the Regency era and delightful social commentary uniting in a book that I wouldn't have read had it not been for this video. This book is about our heroine Georgiana, who is recently kind of like cast off by her family, not because she's done anything particularly wrong, but her parents are just like sick of raising her, not entirely sure, but she falls in with kind of a scandalous, bad crowd run by Francis. Georgiana quickly has to learn how to entertain these people enough to where they keep her around. So she does some kind of outrageous shit to like stay in their good graces. This book also had a lot to say about how men treat women in the olden days, which was something that I never really thought that I would read in a historical romance. You know, you do see men behaving badly in a lot of historicals, and yet it's just never addressed, and in this one it certainly is. That being said, this book isn't all sunshine and rainbows, obviously. There are some pretty graphic assault moments because of, again, that commentary on men and kind of what they do, and also I feel like the romance here that Georgiana ends up having with her hero is not the most developed. But the way that this book was written kind of allows me to overlook a lot of the issues that were here. This book just really, sorry to use the term again, shucked my corn for rip the hell out of this bodice stars. Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. If Nicholas Sparks and Shonda Rhimes got together for a Barefoot Moscato-fueled Nora Ephron movie marathon and then decided to drunk pen a romance, this would be it. I say that with all of the love in my cold, dark heart, because this was one of only 2, I believe, 5-star romances on this list. This book is about lovable golden retriever, woodworker, and innkeeper Daniel, and his relationship with career-minded ER baddie Alexis. Alexis ends up getting stuck in Daniel's small town, and they strike up this really sweet and tender text relationship, which is really perfect timing as Alexis is getting out of an emotionally abusive relationship that she didn't realize was emotionally abusive for a really long time, and now she's kind of reevaluating some of the other relationships in her life that maybe led her to fall into a relationship like this. This book is definitely heavier than a KFC Famous Bowl, and I think PMS definitely influenced my enjoyment of this story, but I really do think there is something to be said about what this book accomplishes, which I think is that perfect balance of handling of like trauma and emotion with something that leaves you really breathless and swoony for a really good man. And how often does that really happen? You know, in our romance reading world, how often are we reading about truly good men? Not often. 5, Baby You're My Everything, You're All I Ever Wanted, Best I Ever Had stars. Number 11, The Wedding Crasher by Mia Sosa. Women are stupid and our hero barely respects them. That's right. He just attempts to marry them to further his career prospects at the law firm that he works at. Real psycho behavior, if you ask me. This book follows consummate weirdo Dean, who at the start of the story is attempting to marry a woman who he's only like agreed to marry because it, again, will further his career prospects and she's like marriage material. But since no one else is in on this, the wedding planner's assistant ends up hearing Dean's fiance talking to a man and like confessing her love for another man. And she's like, oh shit, I gotta make sure this wedding doesn't happen. I want to make sure Dean isn't marrying a woman who doesn't love him. Meanwhile, Dean is like totally aware of this, but he has to like cancel the wedding anyway because everyone around him is like, oh, what a dumbass. And honestly, I would have been happy with the story ending there, but of course it doesn't. Dean, after not going through with this marriage, ends up enlisting the help of Solange, who is willing to do anything to make it up to him for the fact that his wedding didn't go through. And what does she do? She ends up becoming, not fake engaged, but she's in a fake relationship with Dean, again, so that the people at the law firm that he works for think he's a real human and not a robot. Honestly, I sincerely worried about this man's sanity, and I just continued to the farther that I read the story and the links that he was going to try to like keep up this ruse. It was really, really stupid, which sucks because I think Mia Sosa is a really solid romance writer, and I really enjoyed her debut novel, which I think is on my shelves actually somewhere behind me, but even she couldn't save the weird setup for this book, which wasn't helped by a serious lack of tension between our hero and our heroine. 2, He Kissed Like a Baby Bird Trying to Get Food from Mama Bird stars. 10, The No-Show by Beth O'Leary. Let's say you're given a romance novel that is narrated by 3 different women women. And you find out that they're all pining for the same boring-ass white man. And you also know that this book is written by a British lady author. Where is your mind going? Different timelines? This guy has picked these women off one by one because he's a serial killer. He's a master of disguise and is able to somehow keep up this ruse. Your best guess is probably not as chaotic as what Beth cooks up to try and get you to feel emotions. It was pretty obvious to me from the start where the story was going, and yet it still didn't prepare me for how fucking stupid this was. None of the female main characters were likable or grew in any sense over the course of the story to make it interesting, and the man, definitely not worth all the fuss, let me tell you. One, he should have been the one hit by the truck. Stars. Number 9, Ruthless Rival by L.J. Shen. Ruthless Rival might be the most, nothing book that L.J. Shen has written. It's like she put every book that she has written into a blender or asked AI to write one of her books for her, and this is what popped out. You've got an alpha asshole dude who is trying to take down our heroine's dad in a lawsuit because he's trying to win partner at his firm, because of course he is, he's got to be rich and famous and sexy. We also find out that aforementioned dude is also the heroine's long lost childhood love, who she thinks was killed or something, or died. I don't know. She thought he just disappeared from her life and she misses him, blah blah blah. And so a big part of the story is obviously the fact that he is keeping his identity from her, and that ends up being the conflict of the story. I mean, this book wasn't horrible. It had decent writing, and we didn't have any full Snickers in the snatch moments like we do in some of LJ's other books, but it just really wasn't a big standout for me. The hero and the heroine, I think in general, were just lacking in originality, and I just really desperately wanted a different conflict here besides secret identity. This is a pet peeve of mine. I'm gonna go off on a side tangent here. If you're gonna do hidden or secret identity, that's fine, but I would love for an author to use that and not make it the sole conflict of a story. Give me something interesting, switch it up a little bit. I want to not know what's gonna happen, because you tell me at the beginning of the story that this guy's lying to her, I know that that's what's gonna get him in trouble, and that's not fun. It's not fun to read that over and over again. Give me something different. 3, After Prom Sex in the Back of a Limo. Stars. Number 8, Book Lovers by Emily Henry. Book Lovers is an apt name for a book that caters to the kind of person who is both pretentious and self-conscious enough to not be caught in public with an actual romance. This book is about a girl with too much ambition and protectiveness, Nora, and her rival-to-lover's relationship with Charlie. Except it's not actually that at all. It's a story about Nora, who won't let her adult sister, with children, make decisions for herself while they're on vacation in Charlie's hometown. This book was not sexy, and it was not fun. I'll give it to Emily Henry. She's really good at writing these, unbelievably obsessed heroes who would drag their balls through broken glass 10 miles just to hear the heroine fart into a walkie-talkie. But why do all of that for this chick who was not even worth it? 2, This was not worth the Barthel insist. Stars. Number 7, By the Book by Jasmine Guillory. There's nothing sexier than a Beauty and the Beast retelling where the Beast is a reclusive child star you have to coax into writing the memoir that he promised the publisher that you work for. Also extremely sexy when the book that I'm reading, is published in partnership with Disney, so you get no sex scene as rewards for the effort that you put in to slog through this bullshit. 2, Edged into Infinity. Stars. Number 6, Find Me by Courtney Milan. I wish I could find you, you damn tease. Really enjoy Courtney Milan's writing, and I particularly enjoyed the first book in the series, but sadly this book has not been published, so moving right along. Number 5, The Sizzle Paradox by Lily Manon. I just feel like all meet cutes should happen in a Target while you're shopping with your best friend. I think it's even better if that meet cute results in your best friend being abandoned at Target so you can go on an impromptu froyo date with this total stranger. It's also cool when a book doesn't want to be super predictable and you don't end up with the random froyo person, you end up with that best friend you abandoned at Target instead. Oh, and also science, because women in STEM. I honestly should have known better than to pick up this novel in the first place. I cannot stand the way that she writes her juvenile ass heroines, and yet I read it for you. So keep that up here. 2, I would rather use the eye wash station in the lab than touch your rancid junk. Stars. Number 4, Dream On by Angie Hockman. Do you have maladaptive daydreams and fantasize about being with people that you've met one time at a coffee shop? This book says okay, but what if instead of daydreaming, you went into a coma, came out of said coma, and seemed to remember an entire relationship with a man that you've never actually dated? That would be the fever dream that is the plot to Dream On by Angie Hockman. And it's honestly one that could have worked really, really well if the writing and execution was not so damn bizarre. So after being gaslit by her friends and family for a while after waking up from this coma, Cass ends up figuring out that her dream boyfriend is actually a real person, that he co-owns a flower shop with his brother. And she starts dating this dude, even after some protestation on his part because he's been fooled by crazy women before. The crazy woman, by the way, was his ex, who he said faked a pregnancy, but actually she had a miscarriage. So he just abandoned this woman who he purported to love. But fear not, our heroine does not end up with that same dude. She ends up with the dude's brother, and the dude, the like dream boyfriend or whatever, he ends up back with that woman that he abandoned for faking a pregnancy and being crazy. And it all ends with a really bizarrely timed and poorly, weirdly written sex scene. Epilogue. 2, he's an 8, but he's got a foot fetish. Stars. Number 3, Bet on It by Jodie Slaughter. Panic attacks at the Piggly Wiggly aren't so bad when you have a super hot hunky dream man helping you through your mental health crisis. This book is about Aja and Walker. Aja has recently moved to the small town because she's really looking to put down roots, and she never really felt like she could do that in a bigger city, and Walker is back in town actually to take care of his grandmother, but he does not want to be in this small town, which kind of poses a problem because Walker and Aja have pretty quickly fallen for each other. Also, both Walker and Aja have mental health issues and past traumas, and this book is really about watching them kind of grow through these things while falling in love with each other. This book reminded me a lot of Getting His Game Back, but I think I actually preferred this one just a little bit more. I really liked the small town setting and the chemistry between our hero and heroine. It was definitely very palpable. I mean, the book was surprisingly steamy, let me tell you, for a book with a cartoon cover. But I think I just wanted a little bit more here in terms of relationship development. I feel like, again, it's really cool seeing mental health representation in a story, but I think sometimes authors, especially in traditionally published romances, can't seem to find the balance between these kind of like harder hitting issues and the romance. This one definitely leaned a little bit more mental health than romance, but it wasn't quite as unbalanced as Getting His Game Back. So overall, this book was just leagues better than a lot of the shit that I had to read for this video, and I actually do want to read more from this author in the future. So this is 3. I cried during sex, but it wasn't awkward. Stars. Number 2, Husband Material by Alexis Hall. If there's one thing I am, it is a sequel-hating bitch. And my latest victim, unfortunately, is Husband Material by Alexis Hall. This book is the follow-up to Boyfriend Material, which followed total train wreck Luke, who is like the son, I want to say, of like a famous rock star, falling for the first good guy he's ever been with, Oliver, who is a kind of boring attorney. The book really ended on a high note with a happy for now kind of ending that I feel like really well suited the two characters and where they were in their relationship. There's nothing like writing a follow-up novel with no purpose except for to spend more time with characters that were only kind of bearable the first time around. This book's a mess. I don't even know where to begin, really. I'll start with something nice. The writing here was perfectly serviceable. It was not terrible, and I guess the characters themselves are true enough to how they were in the first book. I've never read a book where the characters end up in the exact same place that they started that wasn't a shitty YA fantasy. That's not even to mention all of the other things that didn't work in this book, namely the biggest one being that Luke throughout the story really belittles the way that Oliver experiences queerness and the way that he wants to kind of show himself. I understand that it would be frustrating maybe having a partner who is not out of the closet yet, but Oliver is out of the closet, and yet Luke decides that he wants to continue to push Oliver to be more flamboyant, even though that's not something that he wants for himself, and it is a constant fight and argument in the story, and I was just like, shut the fuck up. Let him live. Like, he doesn't have to live his life the exact way that you do, and if it's incompatible with how you live your life, perhaps y'all are not well suited for each other. I don't know, just a fucking idea. I think if you want to read a book about side characters, bachelorette parties, and Luke and Oliver attending former partners' weddings, and you're just desperate for more time with them as characters, except the first 20% of the book where Oliver is just like completely missing from the story, this is the book for you. But for me, sadly, this is one of the worst books that I have read in a really long time. This gets 1, I am the partner of the guy on Reddit who uses that one song to time his thrusts. Stars. And then ending it off with a geriatric bang, we've got Lucy Checks In by D. Ernst. Geriatric was definitely a bit of a stretch here, but the heroine in the story is in her 40s, and like many romances with older heroines, much older than 40 heroines, honestly, Lucy is out to find herself by going help open a hotel in the French countryside. She's like been in hospitality in the past. She's looking for a new job. Kind of honestly similar in some ways to The Sweet Spot. In this particular story, our heroine meets a man with thinly veiled disdain for women, who she falls for hook, line, and sinker because he's big and hunky. I said this one is very similar to The Sweet Spot in terms of premise, but this one was like 8 parts interior decorating and fixing up hundreds of years old hotel to like 2 parts romance with nary a hot bumpin' and grindin' in sight to glad that's finally over. Stars. What a journey. What a ride. I had a time with this video. I certainly did. I am actually glad that I took on this endeavor, as I am pretty much any time I do these list videos. It feels like quite the accomplishment, obviously, to work through all of these stories. I also really enjoy these because I do end up finding things that I do enjoy. I'm a notoriously picky critic. I obviously play that up a little bit in these videos, but I always come away from these list videos with new romance favorites that I probably would not have read had it not been for the list where these books were included. Definitely would not have picked up that Abby Jimenez book, I can tell you that much. much because I have just not had luck with her books in the past, and yet I'm proven wrong. Before leaving, let me tell you the 5 books that I think are kind of like worth your time from this list. Hopefully one of these will strike your fancy if you have not read them yet. First up, obviously we have The Roughest Draft. This book is an absolute fucking banger. Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez, another 5-star favorite. Then there's Falls Boys and Reputation, which are really solid 4-star reads. And then because those are the only 4 and 5-star reads here, I was sifting through the 3 stars and trying to figure out which one I think like you should definitely pick up. And I still have to say that's a bet on it. I really enjoyed the story. I liked the mental health representation. It does have good small town vibes, and I think this book's like set in the summer, but it would be kind of a good like cozy fall read. So those are my 5 recommendations. I'll leave links to them in the description down below if you want to check them out. If you want to get them from Amazon or just like add them to your Goodreads list. I don't know your story. I don't know what you're up to, but I'll leave those down in the description for you. But thank you so much for watching this video. Again, I had a really fun time making it. There's more of this always on my channel to come. I'm going to have some similar but shorter list videos coming in November, December, so stay tuned. Subscribe if you're not subscribed already. But again, thanks so much for watching. I love y'all so much, and until next time.